Today, we're diving into a 7th century text that lays out a surprisingly detailed blueprint for a just society. We're talking about the 4th chapter of the Quran, called An-Nisa. Now, its name means the women, but you're going to see its scope is so much broader, touching on everything from law and economics to family and the very heart of faith itself. So, that brings us to the big question, right? What can a text from the 7th century really tell us about building a just and orderly society today? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore. We'll look at how An-Nisa tackles these timeless issues of fairness, equity, and social responsibility. You ready? Let's get into it. All right, to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to break the chapter down into 4 main themes. First, we'll see how it focuses on protecting the most vulnerable people in society. Then, we'll get into its framework for family life. After that, we'll dig into its really powerful demand for absolute justice. And finally, we'll uncover the core beliefs that tie it all together. Okay, first up, protecting the vulnerable. This is a huge theme in this chapter. You have to remember, at that time, orphans often had zero legal protection. So what we see here isn't just a friendly suggestion. The text lays out specific, non-negotiable duties for their care. And the language it uses is wow. It's incredibly strong. Verse 10 gives this really stark warning about exploiting an orphan's property. We're not just talking about bad accounting here. It's framed as a major sin with some pretty severe consequences down the line. So yeah, it's not just about warnings. The chapter gives guardians a literal, practical checklist. They have to protect an orphan's property, use it for the orphan's own good, and even check that they're mature enough before handing it all over. And get this, if a guardian is well off, they're told not to take any payment for their work. The message is clear. This is a sacred trust, not a side hustle. All right, let's see how these ideas of protection and fairness are woven into the very fabric of family life. The chapter provides a really detailed framework for marriage, inheritance, and just how people should treat each other. What's really interesting here is the focus on respect and responsibility. For example, men are explicitly told to give women their dowries, a marriage gift that belongs only to her. The text also bans the old practice of inheriting women. Kindness isn't just suggested, it's a command. And men are given the role of financial providers. And what if things go wrong? Well, there's a process for that too. Bring in mediators from both families to work it out. The chapter also gets super specific about money, especially inheritance. This table just shows a few examples of the incredibly detailed formulas laid out in verses 11 and 12. You see, both men and women get specific fixed shares of an estate. The whole point seems to be a systematic distribution of wealth, making sure it doesn't all just end up in one person's hands. And to build a stable society, the text is also crystal clear about who is off limits when it comes to marriage. Verse 23 spells out a very specific list, which really solidifies the idea of a core family unit and sets clear boundaries. Okay, this next part, it's arguably the central pillar of the entire chapter, the idea of upholding absolute justice. This isn't just a side note, it's a theme that runs through everything, law, money, personal behavior, and it demands fairness with absolutely no exceptions. And this verse just perfectly captures that ideal. I mean, think about it. It's a radical command. Stand up for justice, no matter what. Even if it means you have to testify against yourself or your parents or your closest relatives. Whether someone is rich or poor shouldn't matter. Justice has to be completely, totally impartial. And this idea of justice isn't just some lofty concept. It's applied to everyday stuff. You can see the contrast right here. On one side, you're commanded to judge fairly, return things you're entrusted with, and do business honestly. And on the other, you're forbidden from cheating, taking what's not yours, or, as verse 102 highlights, blaming an innocent person for your own screw-up.
You know, even the instruction to fight is framed through this lens of justice. Verse 75 basically asks believers, why wouldn't you fight for God and for the helpless men, women, and children who are being oppressed? So in this context, fighting is defined as an act of liberation, a way to defend people who can't defend themselves.
So what's the driving force behind all these detailed social laws? Well, that brings us to our final section, the core principles of faith. These are the theological ideas that provide the foundation, the ultimate why behind this whole vision for society. A huge principle here is a very clear structure of authority. Verse 59 sets up a chain of command: obey God first, then the messenger, and then those in authority. But crucially, it also gives a way to resolve disputes. If there's a disagreement, you have to take it back to the original sources, God and the messenger, for the final word. The chapter is also completely unambiguous about the absolute worst spiritual crime. Verses 48 and 116 say that God does not forgive anyone for associating partners with him, though he might forgive other lesser sins. This really cements absolute monotheism as the non-negotiable bedrock of the faith. And the stakes, well, they're presented as eternal. These two verses, which show up right after the inheritance laws, draw a really sharp line in the sand. For those who follow God's rules, the promise is paradise, described as gardens beneath which rivers flow. But for those who disobey and cross those lines, the warning is of a shameful punishment. And finally, the text actually makes an argument for its own divine origin. Verse 82 throws down a challenge to the audience, inviting them to really scrutinize it. The argument is that its internal consistency, despite being revealed over many years, is proof that it couldn't have come from a human mind. So, from protecting orphans to defining the gravest sin, An-Nisa offers this incredibly comprehensive vision for a society built on divine law. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. How does a text with such detailed rules challenge us to think about the connection between law, justice, and faith in our own world today?